Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that the bill be now read a second time. Last July, the government announced plans to form the Singapore Food Agency, SFA, to oversee food safety and food security from farm to fork. Currently, the regulation of the food security is divided among three public sector agencies. The Agri-Food and Veterinary Authority, AVA, regulates food safety before retail, during import, local production, and manufacturing. The National Environment Agency, NEA, regulates food hygiene at the retail level. Analysis of food samples is carried out at laboratories under Health Sciences Authority, or HSA. The SFA will consolidate regulatory oversight for these different aspects of food safety and security in a single public sector agency. Singapore is not the first country to adopt a farm-to-fork model. We have studied other countries like Ireland, where a single agency responsible for food safety along the entire food supply chain. There are merits to consolidate the responsibilities for food safety and security into a single agency. One, it emphasizes the high priority and commitment that the government places on food safety and security. Two, it allows uniform application of measures, faster response, and more efficient and effective use of resources and expertise. NEA will, however, continue to develop and manage hawker centers as our community dining rooms. This arrangement will enable sharper focus by SFA and NEA in their respective roles vis-à-vis hawker centers. HSA will continue to regulate health supplements. HPB will continue to promote the consumption of healthy food. SFA will support them from the food safety angle. AVA's remaining non-food, plant and animal-related functions will be transferred to the National Parks Board, or NParks, via the National Parks Board Amendment Bill 2019. The Minister for National Development will explain this transfer during the second reading of the National Parks Board Amendment Bill 2019. Mr. Speaker, food security is fundamental to our national security. Let me repeat. Food security is fundamental to our national security. We have worked hard to ensure Singapore's food safety and security over the decades. This is critical because Singapore depends heavily on food imports. The 2018 Global Food Security Index puts Singapore as the #1 country in the world in ensuring that citizens have access to safe and nutritious food at affordable prices. This is testimony to the hard work by generations of our staff since AVA's early days at the primary production department in pre-independence Singapore. We have done well, but cannot take the current situation for granted. Let me elaborate. The agriculture and food, or agri-food, landscape is changing rapidly. By 2050, global population is expected to grow another 30% to 9.7 billion. Global food demand is also projected to rise by 60% as incomes rise in developing countries, leading to greater demand for meat and proteins. Vital resources to meet the increased food demand, such as water and energy, are increasingly scarce. The World Bank estimates that agriculture accounts for 70% of global water consumption, but 1/3 of the world's population lives in water-stressed areas. Over the longer-term horizon too, climate change will exacerbate these threats. Extreme temperatures, droughts, and floods from rising sea levels will affect production yield. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, estimates widespread declines in crop yields of between 10 to 25% by 2050 due to climate change impacts. The International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines forecasts a 20% reduction in Asian rice yields for every degree of temperature rise. Rice becomes sterile if exposed to temperatures above 35 degrees Celsius for more than 1 hour during flowering. A heat wave during flowering season, like in Australia right now, would wipe out the entire year's crop. Scientists from various disciplines all mark 2050 as a watershed year when projected increase in population intersects with severe decline in crop yields due to unmitigated climate change. Competition for water, energy, and consequently food will escalate conflicts if not mitigated. Indeed, right here in ASEAN, one of my counterparts shared with me that the impact of climate change is already being felt and has caused more frequent and severe droughts and floods in the Mekong River Delta, which is the rice bowl of Asia. Rice production can fall by more than 50%. These are real-life threats and can hit us badly because we import more than 90% of the food. The 2007 and 2008 global food crisis, which stemmed from various factors including droughts and rising oil prices, triggered spikes in food prices worldwide and even led to street protests in Indonesia and Bangladesh. Food-producing countries like India and Brazil introduced export bans. This impact was felt in Singapore in the form of increased prices. Fortunately, we did not face food shortages. We also need to manage the risk from the growing complexity in global food supply chains. Our food undergoes multiple processes involving many players in different countries before reaching our tables. For example, the frozen pizza in our supermarket can have more than 10 different ingredients from different sources. The pineapple could have been grown in Philippines, the ham brined in Australia, the tomato sauce canned in the US, and the flour milled in Singapore. This simple example highlights the confluence of food supply and food safety, and the challenges we face. On the one hand, we get to enjoy a wide range of ingredients and cuisine. On the other hand, complex global supply chains increase the potential points of failure where contamination can enter the food chain. This makes it more difficult to identify the source of the problems when they occur. Was the cause of food poisoning incident due to pure hygiene in the restaurant or hotel? Could it have been due to high levels of pesticide on the raw ingredients? Contaminants introduced in the manufacturing process of packing or canning, or deterioration in quality and safety during transportation. Such challenges will intensify. Complex supply chains will evolve as climate change affects production. Epidemiology has to keep up with changes in the survival and transmission patterns of foodborne diseases. In Singapore, government agencies have worked well together to address food safety and security, and we have a strong reputation. But we must ensure that our food safety and security regime is well ahead of the curve. It is in our DNA to constantly look ahead, anticipate trends, adapt, and seize opportunities. We will consolidate NEA and AVA's current capabilities in licensing, compliance management, investigation, and testing by HSA in SFA. SFA will be able to holistically respond to food safety incidents wherever these occur along the full food supply chain. For example, in the scenario of a food poisoning incident, a single team will oversee the entire food supply chain and manage investigations, starting from the accreditation of overseas farms to import, to intermediate processing by central kitchens and retailers, and finally, to the proper storage and preparation at the retail outlet. This will allow SFA to respond more promptly to trace the source of contamination. Mr. Speaker, amidst the uncertainties facing the agri-food landscape, our goal is to seize the opportunity for Singapore to turn our food challenge into strategic advantages. Strategic advantages to secure our food supply, transform our agri-food industry, develop our local enterprises, and provide good jobs to Singaporeans. Just like how we have turned our vulnerability in water into opportunity. Let me give a few examples. First, New food production methods and techniques are emerging at an unprecedented pace. Modern food production has become more productive, sustainable, and resilient to climate change. We can learn from others around the world how they leverage on their strengths and overcome their constraints. The United Arab Emirates enjoys cheap and abundant energy, but struggles with a hot and dry desert climate where water is extremely scarce. On the other hand, water is abundant in Netherlands, but energy is expensive and scarce. I visited a tomato farm in Dubai last month, which channels waste carbon dioxide from air conditioning back into the glasshouse to boost plants' growth. To reduce water use, the farm recirculates the nutrient solution used to feed the crops. The farm is able to produce tomatoes at high yields consistently throughout the year, even when the temperature outside reaches 50 degrees. Last year, I visited Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands and was impressed by the innovation in greenhouse technologies to reduce energy consumption in the cultivation of tomatoes. Their target is to produce net zero energy greenhouses. Singapore suffers scarcity at both extremes, scarcity of water and energy. We must develop our own approach to agriculture, which accounts for our deficiency in water and energy, and to add to this complexity, also land. Technology now allows us to solve this conundrum. Our future farms will be different from the farms that we are familiar with today. Rather than back-breaking physical toil under the sun, new age farmers will work indoors in an environmentally controlled enclosure, much like the domes at the Gardens by the Bay. Instead of shovels and hoes, they will operate computers controlling autonomous robots that plant seeds and harvest crops. With the right crops, these farms operate at much higher productivity and can sustain good jobs. Indeed, such technological innovations apply not to just land-based farming, but even aquaculture, where we can increase the yield and improve the quality of our local seafood. The working environments will be almost indistinguishable from the offices or automated production lines many of us work in today. In addition to regulatory oversight of the food industry, SFA will partner businesses to transform our food industry. We must seize opportunities in the agri-food sector to further enhance our food supply resilience. We must sow the seeds now for Singapore's development into an agri-food hub. In time to come, we will harvest the benefits. A strong stable of local enterprises which can export sustainable urban food solutions to cities around the world. Good jobs which will appeal to Singaporeans and the secure supply of safe food for Singaporeans. Second, the emergence of new and novel food products. These have the potential to provide us with a safe and sustainable supply of food without compromising on taste or health. One example is plant-based protein with meat-like texture and taste from companies such as Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. These new foods products have a smaller environmental footprint compared to conventional meat products and could potentially be scaled up to meet future food demand. Another example is the cultivation of insects such as the black soldier fly for animal feed. This will require us to make a conscious effort to position Singapore as an agri-food hub, from facilitative regulations that encourage innovation to creating the necessary R&D ecosystem and growing a pipeline of Singaporean talent. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me now highlight some of the main elements of the Singapore Food Agency Bill. Part 2 of the bill establishes SFA as a body corporate with a structure similar to major statutory boards. Clause 5 and 6 lay out SFA's functions and power, which are drawn from existing provisions in the AVA and NEA Acts. These include developing the food industry, regulating food safety across the supply chain, and regulating street hawking and trade fairs. Part 3 and 6, Part 3 to 6 covers governance matters such as the appointment and decision-making procedures of the SFA, personnel matters including the appointment of the chief executive, and financial provisions of SFA. The provisions are aligned with requirements in the Public Sector Governance Act 2018. Part 7 of the bill contains miscellaneous provisions necessary for the administration and enforcement of the bill. In particular, Clause 43 will protect against the improper use of accreditation, certification, and inspection marks that are administered by SFA. This includes schemes to be administered by SFA and third-party testing, inspection, and certification services. This is to ensure that all licenses and products carrying such mark meet SFA's stringent standards in order to facilitate the growth of the local farming and food export industries. Part 8 contains the provisions that transfer the relevant food regulatory undertakings, including assets, liabilities, and employees from AVA, NEA, and HSA to SFA. Once the transfer takes place, the AVA Act will be repealed by Clause 55. Part 9 of the bill makes related and consequential amendments to other acts. First, with the consolidation of food safety functions in a single agency and the transfer of non-food related functions to NPAC, some legislation become obsolete and are being repealed. Clause 56 repeals the Cattle Act as that becomes obsolete, with similar powers provided for under the Animals and Birds Act, Sales of Food Act, and Environmental Public Health Act, or EPHA. Clause 59 will repeal provisions in the Fisheries Act relating to the prohibition, regulation, or control of piranha or any other dangerous species of fish. NPACs will take over this function from AVA and draw powers from the Animals and Birds Act. The regulation of stage shows under the EPHA will be abolished, as this is already regulated under the Public Entertainments Act administered by the Singapore Police Force. Next, Clause 62 amends the function of the NEA in the National Environment Agency Act to remove food-related functions since these are transferred to SFA. Clauses 57 and 61 further make consequential amendments to the Environmental Public Health Act and the Infectious Diseases Act, IDA, respectively, to transfer powers from NEA's Director General of Public Health to SFA's Director General Food Administration, called DGFA. DGFA will administer Parts 4 and 9 of the EPHA that relate to the safety of food and drinking water for consumption, and the licensing of retail food establishments, markets, and hawkers. DGFA will also administer Sections 38 and 39 of the IDA, which relate to the supply of food and water to vessels. The EPHA will also be amended to provide powers to both the Director General of Public Health and the DGFA to modify the conditions of a license after giving notice to the licensee. This is to facilitate further reviews to extend the duration of licenses issued under the EPHA. Clauses 58, 59, 64, and 65 make consequential amendments to the Feeding Staffs Act, Fisheries Act, Sales of Food Act, and Wholesome Meat and Fish Act, respectively, to transfer the administration of the acts from the Director General, Agri-Food and Veterinary Services to DGFA. Clauses 59, 64, and 65 makes other related amendments to the Fisheries Act, Sale of Food Act, and Wholesome Meat and Fish Act, respectively, to provide the Minister to make regulations requiring records on imports and food stocks to be kept and supplied to DGFA upon request. This will allow DGFA to monitor the supply of fish, meat, and other food items to ensure a secure and reliable food supply in Singapore. These powers will extend to food businesses, fisheries, and persons involved in fish cultivation and importers of food in Singapore. DGFA will also be empowered to take into consideration the ability of importers of food items such as meat and fish to provide a secure and reliable supply when granting licenses. and to impose license conditions to this end. This will enable DGFA to work with importers of key food items to adopt plans, including preventive strategies to mitigate the impact of supply disruptions. Mr. Speaker, sir, as mentioned earlier, food security is fundamental to our national security. Members will recall that only last December, Malaysia had announced that it was considering limiting or stopping egg exports and restricting exports of certain types of seafood. This will not be the last time that Singapore faces possible disruption to our food imports. We must therefore continue to diversify our food import sources and not be over-reliant on any single source. With the formation of SFA, we will continue to strengthen Singapore's food security and reduce our vulnerability to external volatility and price hikes. SFA will also continue to partner other government agencies to ensure basic food items remain affordable. Clause 60 amends the Health Promotion Board Act to better delineate the food functions between SFA and HPB. HPB's role is to encourage and facilitate healthier food choices in Singapore. Clause 63 abolishes the exclusion of land used for agriculture from being treated as a development for the purposes of the Planning Act. This paves the way for SFA to work closely with URA to better develop land in Singapore that will be used for agricultural purposes. Clause 64 makes a related amendment to the Sale of Food Act to enable regulations to prescribe the circumstances when trademarks may or may not be used in relation to any particular food or its advertising. This will support existing work by the Formula Milk Task Force led by SMS Kopokun, in particular to ensure that labeling and the provision of information are done in a manner that protects consumer interests. The implementation details will be finalized by the government agencies supporting the task force. Part 10 of the bill provides for saving and transitional arrangements. This will cover AVA's financial statements for financial year 2018 and appeals made before the commencement of SFA and pending when the amendments take effect. As in other bills, the Minister conferred power to make regulations setting out additional provisions of a saving or transitional nature. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, this bill provides for the reorganization of government to further our efforts to ensure and secure the supply of food, safe food, for Singapore. As the lead agency for food-related matters, SFA will be well placed to work closely with all stakeholders from farm to fork to transform the agri-food industry, seize opportunities in the future food landscape, and provide good jobs for Singapore. Sir, I beg to move.